Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Ask Benny episode of the Language Hacking Podcast, where I'm by myself and I'm tackling one specific topic in a much shorter form than my interview episodes. So, today I want to talk about the process I have for studying vocabulary in country. So, as I'm recording this currently, I am in Brazil, so I've been expanding on my Portuguese vocabulary because I'm just about to do a book tour and I have to answer some complicated questions on language learning. So I really want to make sure I'm pushing my Portuguese to the absolute best it can be. So essentially, what's happening is I am only socializing with Brazilians. So that gives me loads of exposure to the language. And I will, of course, run across words that I don't know yet. And in the moment, I will either ask them if they can explain that word to me. Usually that's the best because they will use other words. It's kind of like using a monolingual dictionary that you see a definition of the word. And this way, you think less through translations. So that's the most ideal. And if I hear that word, I may remember it in the moment, but I'll pretty much always want to note it down. Another thing I do, which is a little bit easier for keeping track over the long term, because my dictionary of choice is WordReference. I'm sure you guys have come across this. It tends to be the one of the best online free dictionaries for especially European languages. So, and that's definitely the case for Portuguese. So what I'll do if I come across a word I don't know is I'll look it up on word reference on my phone. I do have data access here in Brazil. So I'll look that word up, I'll see what it means, and that'll help me in the moment. And then I'll actually put it away and forget about it. So I don't have the extra work in the moment of having to note that word for my studies. I used to have to open something separate, like maybe a note taking app or all the way to my Google Sheet file to input it in that moment. But generally, I'm out and about or I'm talking to people. I don't want to have that extra step of logging the word to study later. So I simply look it up in word reference. And I've discovered this pretty recently. In fact, I didn't even think about this. Is that word reference has a history, a search history built into it. So that means that once a week, I will very simply open the app again. This also works on the website. If you're using the website version, it keeps a running list of the most recent terms that you search for. But I think it's a bit easier to use the search function or the search history on the app. So I'll see all the terms that I've searched for, and I'll go down to the last week and I'll just click on each one again. And then, in the comfort of my home, in a situation where I'm not live trying to use the language, then I will input all of these into the equivalent of an Excel sheet, or I prefer to use Google Sheets. And very simply, one column is the target language, the other column is native language, in my case, English, target language being Portuguese. So I will input all of that from word reference, and these are taken from me having looked it up in the field. If you're learning another language that's not European, maybe the app you use will have a search function, a search history built into it, which will help a lot if you want to do this kind of thing after the fact rather than in the moment. So once a week, I'll fill up that Google Sheet. And then usually when it reaches about 200 terms, that's when I will export that as a CSV file. And then I'll import that on my computer into Anki, which is my flashcard studying app of choice. And I'll synchronize that so that's done on my phone. It's easier to input it on my computer, even though I only usually study Anki on my phone because I do the synchronization. The databases are kept to the same regardless. And I import those into the same deck. So I just have the one Portuguese deck, and every week or so, I'll add another 200 terms to it. I had a big burst, especially the first 2 months I was here in Brazil, of a bunch of words that I had forgotten, and then a bunch of words that inspired me to look up other words. Like I might have come across the word sparrow, the bird, and then I realized, you know what? There's actually a lot of birds that I don't know how to say in Portuguese. So I intentionally just did a quick Google for different birds. It didn't have to be Portuguese. I just did a Google of different bird types, and I saw sparrow and not just flying birds like ostrich and all these other words I didn't really think to use that often. And I added those. I did have to look up some of them, obviously, in word reference. I added all of them to my growing database. So rather than just learning the words I was coming across, I was using those words to show me the categories of vocabulary that I still wasn't quite so strong on. And that meant that I really was reaching 200 words very quickly, even though I wasn't technically coming across 200 words. Because at my more advanced level of Portuguese, I'm not as likely to encounter words that I don't know as I would have been as a beginner. But I am likely to encounter words that show me words I wouldn't know by simply being in the same category. So, yeah, I added a bunch of them and imported them each week, making sure I'm staying on top of my like flashcard studying is so important to me every single day. I'm staying on top of the new cards, staying on top of my reviews. If I'm in travel mode and I miss out on a few days, I set aside extra time to catch up. Because in an app like Anki, you can tell it to force a bigger review, because my default is to only see 30 words maximum. Because 30 words new that are maximum, or sorry, 30 review words and 20 new words, I find is sustainable in the long term. That it's a little bit of a study time, but if I'm having a busy day, I'll still likely get through that. Whereas when I know I've fallen behind, I'll pump that up a bit and I will increase my review time. And because of that, I have stayed on top of my Anki decks. I mean, I've fallen behind temporarily, and then I've increased the review numbers. And that's meant that all of the new vocabulary that I've encountered here in Brazil, and any that I've been inspired to add to my database, has improved. And I'll have this very, very big new deck now that I'm going to try to stay on top of moving forward, even while I'm in the likes of Thailand, to make sure I'm not forgetting my Portuguese, both for situations I'll randomly bump into Brazilians abroad and in preparation for coming back to Brazil at some stage, hopefully next year. Um, so yeah, that's my process of looking them up on the go through word reference, and then using its search history to import them into my deck, and then using similar words to just do like a quick search. Usually I actually find websites that are made for teaching people English have been helpful for inspiring me. Like animal vocabulary, like I said, was an example that came up. I didn't need its translations in Portuguese from the website itself. That's a bit too specific to likely find quickly in a Google search. Whereas I could just find the category in English and then look up the individual words myself to add to my database. And I'm a lot more confident with my Portuguese now. There's a lot of words that I feel were on the edge that I kind of should have known by now, and I just never got around to learning. But by having a bit more of a systematic approach, the combination of randomly coming across words and then intentionally looking up words that are somewhat similar has meant I have given my vocabulary that big boost, and I should be a bit more confident now for having these complex interview style questions I'm going to be getting over the next couple of weeks about language learning and many other things, I'm sure. So yeah, that is my process of improving vocabulary while I travel in country. I hope you found that interesting. And as always, make sure to give us a review if you're enjoying these podcasts at languagehacking.com/review, and hit me up on social media. I am at Irish Polyglot for most of them. I'm also at Language Hacking for just language learning updates, because Irish Polyglot, I do a mixture, mostly travel stuff. And I do other accounts in other languages. While I've been in Brazil, I did at Brasilirlandês, an account just in Portuguese, which I have been really enjoying using. And I even had one of my videos go viral on that account, a video I made in Portuguese about what I love about Brazil. So you never know when you are practicing your languages what fun things may come out of it. But yeah, that was just a side note from this main point I wanted to make about vocabulary. So I hope you found that interesting. Until the next time, happy language learning.